Hello, and welcome to today's Training Industry webinar, Charting Your L&D Career Path, Strategies and Insights from Training Industry. I'm Danielle Murdaugh, Associate Editor at Training Industry, and I'm so happy you guys could join us today. Before we get started, I would like to quickly go over a few housekeeping items to help you interact with our speaker and get the most out of today's program. Throughout today's event, please feel free to leave comments in the chat window and submit questions in your Q&A window. We will address all comments and questions at the end of the program during our Q&A section. We also encourage you to share the information you received today with your colleagues and network via social media. Please follow hashtag TI webinars so we're able to track your contribution to the conversation and interact with you online. When the program ends, you'll receive a short evaluation survey that will pop open in your browser, and we would greatly welcome your feedback about the content, speaker, and whatever else you'd like to see us do in the future. As always, today's webinar will be recorded and archived on trainingindustry.com, and you will be receiving a follow-up email from us that will include a link to the on-demand program so you can review it again later and share with your team. If this is your first webinar with us, a special welcome goes out to you. Training Industry exists to make connections among learning and development professionals like you. We offer tons of resources to support your role in L&D through lab events like today's webinar, as well as our articles, magazines, conferences, research reports, and our podcast. Training Industry is your go-to resource for learning solutions. You can visit trainingindustry.com to learn more. Our objective in offering sponsored programs like this is to allow our membership the opportunity to learn from the most innovative thought leaders in our industry. Now to get started, let me introduce you to today's speaker, Dr. Amy Duvernay. Dr. Amy Duvernay is Director of Training and Development at Training Industry, where she oversees all processes related to Training Industry's courses for training professionals, including their development and evaluation. Prior to joining Training Industry, Amy worked as a business consultant designing and evaluating organizational interventions in a variety of industries. She holds a PhD in industrial/organizational psychology from North Carolina State University and is a certified professional in training management. Today, Dr. Duvernay will discuss career pathways in L&D and the skills you need to target based on your desired career path. All right, Dr. Duvernay, you can take it from here. Thanks.
Thanks, Danielle. Let me take over the screen share. Hey, welcome. Thank you all for coming. I'm so excited to be here speaking to you about L&D careers and sharing some strategies and insights from training industry research on how you can plan your own career path. As L&D professionals, I think we tend to find it really easy to focus our attention on the development of our learners, but we often neglect our own development. So it's really great that you've all taken time, carved time out of your day to think about creating this continuous strategic plan for your own career path. Before we get into some of the strategies and insights, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my own career path to demonstrate kind of what a L&D career path can look like. So when we think about a career path, we may envision something like this. This is a straight kind of linear trajectory. This notion that an individual might enter an organization and work their way up, acquiring more and more responsibility over time, maybe getting promoted to a manager or a leader role, and then retiring with 20 to 30 years of tenure is kind of outdated at this point. Even baby boomers have an average of about 12 jobs throughout their career. So when we look at today's career trajectories, it looks a little more like this. So we kind of start out somewhere, and then there's a big jumbled mess where there's a ton of mobility within the career that we get to, and eventually, we may end up at some kind of final point. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about where I started and how I got to where I am. So I started out as an assistant media buyer right out of college, and really worked on placing ads within TV and radio. And then I went back to grad school to earn my PhD in industrial and organizational psychology. There I served as an instructor. I taught undergraduate courses in psychology and statistics. I did some applied work as a job analyst, looking at the components that make up various job roles within the NC State Highway Patrol. I also served as an undergraduate advisor, where I thought through the different kinds of courses that undergraduates should take to help them reach their own career goals. And then finally, as I moved out of graduate school, I took a role with ONET, the Occupational Network, within a division within the Department of Labor, analyzing and studying the kinds of roles that make up the US workforce. So across the way, I got a good breadth of kind of learning and development and facilitation, career planning. I learned that I really liked research and to get my hands kind of dirty in the data. And I learned that I like to apply that data. So this workforce analyst role didn't give me that applied aspect that I was really looking for. So I then moved into a consultant role. Where I took a lot of research and a lot of data that I analyzed to recommend solutions on employee hiring and selection systems. So this gave me a ton of what I was looking for in terms of having that research passion and focus, as well as applying those research principles and getting to see the impact of that research and those recommendations on the job. But it was missing another aspect that I was looking for, and that was a face-to-face kind of in-person scenario. So I moved from there into the director of research role here at Training Industry, and I did a ton of research on best practices within L&D and what L&D professionals can do to really drive effectiveness within an organization. This was a great position, but it was missing that applied aspect. I really wanted a scenario where I could take the research, make recommendations, and see the impact of those recommendations. So a couple of other bumps along the way and landed in the Director of Certification Programs role here at Training Industry when we launched our CPTM program in 2015. So this gave me the opportunity to study the certification, the exam, the components that make up a training manager role, as well as apply those in the program and see the impact of that training and that certification on eventual careers. And about, 6 years ago, we started adding additional courses into our training industry catalog, and that was when it made sense to move into this director of training and development role, really focus more on learning and development. And again, this role had my three kind of main must-haves. So research, being able to research and do data analysis, being able to translate those research findings into impact and see the impact of that. And then an in-person relationship. So being able to work in person with my colleagues and coworkers. And I should say that along the way, I also took on the role of adjunct faculty member at NC State, teaching as part of my graduate school program, which gave me that facilitation piece that I also really enjoyed. So I highlighted this one to let you know kind of career trajectories are not linear, but also it's really important to think about your must-haves. What are the components of your previous roles and your future roles that you really want to have? And start thinking about how your roles fit together to tell that story of where you're headed. Today's knowledge workers career trajectory looks a lot like this, as I'm sure many of yours do, moving into lateral positions, transitioning within different organizations, and researchers have kind of entitled this a boundaryless career. The main kind of important focus there when we talk about the boundaryless career is that it puts the autonomy and control in the employees or the individual's hands. So one thing I would like for everyone to walk away with this from this presentation with is an emphasis on your own autonomy, that you are the driver in your career, and to really start thinking through and being planful and thoughtful about where you're headed. So today, I'm going to first start out by talking to you about L&D careers, the kinds of job roles that we have within learning and development. Next, I'll talk to you about context, the kinds of career context in which these L&D careers are enacted. We'll move into an emphasis on paths to leadership. So how do we get into that next step role within a learning and development department? And then finally, I'll finish with some career planning strategies. Hopefully you'll walk away with some tips and strategies that'll help you as you continue to focus on your L&D career. I have this great quote here from Julie Winkle-Giuliani. She wrote an article for us in our winter magazine last year. The point here is that when you think about your career, you shouldn't think only about what you want to be, but really start thinking about what you want to do. What are those core components that are going to make you feel passionate, that are going to get you excited to get up and go to work in the morning? So with that, let's spend some time talking about learning and development careers. Now, here at Training Industry, we've been conducting a survey on L&D careers and salaries for over 5 years. We use this survey to help to inform the courses that we offer and also the competencies that we emphasize within those courses. So I'm going to share the results of our most recent survey administration throughout this presentation. When we think about L&D careers, there are some more traditional roles that tend to make up the L&D industry. What you see here on your screen is what we call our training process framework, and we also call it the orchestra model. And this framework shares many of the processes or the main processes within a training function or training organization. And we call it our orchestra model because we kind of envision the leader, the manager, the director, the CLO, standing at the bottom middle of that diagram, conducting and managing those processes. So our traditional L&D roles fit very nicely into this framework. At the administration level, we're talking about registering learners into courses. We're talking about reporting and metrics, maybe some financials, maybe some material fulfillment. Traditional L&D roles in this layer of the framework would be coordinators or administrators. The next layer that we see here is content. And this is really getting at preparing the content that we're providing to our learners. Here, a traditional role is really instructional designer or content developer. And the next layer we see is delivery. This is getting the materials to the learners. And traditionally, our training programs were instructor-led and in-person. Facilitators and instructors were our kind of #1 traditional L&D role in this layer. And then that final middle layer is around technology. There are some of the many technologies available listed to you there, LMSs, authoring tools, as well as this really key important factor of integrating those learning technologies across each other. And here, a learning technologist is really your main role in terms of accomplishing that integration and also implementing those technologies. And again, as I mentioned, the leader or the oversight of this whole process stands kind of at the bottom middle of the diagram. We've got training managers, training directors, and CLOs. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the newer jobs within the L&D field. But before I do, I would love it if you would each kind of participate, chat, share some information about yourselves, open up your chat window and just tell us, what is your current job title? And I'm going to read a few of those as they come in. So I see training manager, I see program director, senior global trainer, training coordinator. These are great. They're coming in so fast. Learning experience designer, talent enablement manager, L&D customer success manager. These are great. So some of these are more traditional kinds of titles. Others are maybe a little bit different. We've got consultant, HR consultant, chief learning officer, director of L&D. So thank you all for sharing and keep them coming. I'm going to move to the next screen and talk to you a little bit about the new kinds of jobs that we have within the L&D industry. So there's been a little bit of a shift that has created more emphasis on nuance within L&D roles. The pandemic accelerated some things that had already been happening, one being more value, I guess, being placed on L&D, that L&D is now really getting that seat at the table and being seen as this strategic solution for business issues and business problems. And this has created a need for greater emphasis on consultation and partnership. Understanding the root why behind the training that we're providing and what the business partner really needs has become even more critical as we shift from order taker to solution crafter. So with that emphasis, we see more roles coming about with the title of consultation or partnership, partner in it, to emphasize that relational aspect of what's needed in L&D. In the bottom, you'll see some things around that: learning performance consultant, learning partner. We've also had some changes in the nature of L&D. So L&D is becoming more and more integrated with other employee experience functions like HR. The impact of L&D in the hiring and promotion systems, in succession planning and performance management is starting to become more and more recognized, and the importance of each of those components working together is become critical. So there's been more emphasis on this idea of understanding the whole employee journey, what's happening before training, what's happening after training, how does the training fit within the entire puzzle, which creates this need for a greater emphasis on experience mapping, on thinking through learning journeys, thinking through career paths and where training and development interventions could have impact on those career paths at various stages of an employee's life cycle, as well as competency modeling and understanding the kinds of competencies that are needed to transition into different roles. With the addition of new technologies, there's also been an emphasis on shifting to sourcing and curating materials. We have learning libraries available to give us the opportunity to take this sourced material and create those learning paths and learning journeys. Also, with these new learning technologies, there's more emphasis and need to have those technical capabilities. So you see things around capability or curriculum architect, you see L&D curator, positions around blended learning designer that are incorporating more of these kinds of changing areas in L&D. And then as L&D is shifted into this greater emphasis as a strategic solution, there's also a need for a greater visibility of the impact of L&D. And here we see roles coming out around learning analytics, ways to crunch that data and report it out and demonstrate that impact. So before we move to the next slide, we do have a poll here. Like to understand a little bit better what your career goals are. We do have some data from our most recent survey to understand kind of within our survey respondents, what were their aspirational goals. We gave them a lot more categories than these, but I will say that these were the top. So I'm interested to see if this group has a similar kind of pattern. So which of the following best describes your career goals? Is it becoming a CLO, a training manager? Maybe you want to start your own training company, become an independent consultant. Maybe you want to be a director of training and development, or perhaps there's something other than that, some other role that really encompasses what you're looking to achieve in your career. Give you a minute to complete that.
All right, let's give everybody about 5 more seconds. Oh, looks like we're actually good. Let me go and share results.
Okay, great. So it looks like Director of Training and Development won the day here, followed by Training Manager and CLO. We do have 20% saying other. Would be interested in those folks who did select other, sharing in the chat what those other career goals might be. I will say that in our sample, we found that 50% of respondents aspire to reach that executive L&D level. So either selecting CLO or Director of Training and Development as their aspirational goal. And then another 20% aspired to either become a training manager or to start their own company. So those 4 categories explained about 70% of the career goals. We're going to spend some time focusing on how to achieve those kinds of things today. Before we do, let's talk about the most common job roles. Now, again, this data is gathered from our most recent salary administration. We had over 350 L&D professionals complete the survey, collected the data in the past 6 months, so it's very recent. And we did limit our analysis to US and Canada when we were looking at salaries, because we did find that outside of those areas, there was a much wider range, and we did want to compare apples to apples. So looking at this slide, you'll see a few trends for the more executive types of roles, CLO, Director of Training, Training Manager. Salaries tend to be higher. Also, those folks tend to report having direct reports, so they have more responsibility. Whereas in the lower ranges, the learning consultants, the facilitators, content developers weren't tending to have direct reports. Another interesting thing that's descriptive of our sample is that the folks that completed our survey were highly experienced. And this is really common in the research that we do. We find that our audience does have this great deal of tenure, which helps us to feel really confident about our results. But I will say that it does make it more likely that our ranges might be on the higher range. range when we look at salaries, and we are more likely, I think, to see those executive positions happening in our samples. The only other thing that I think really interesting to highlight is that almost regardless of title, we see that our sample had a graduate degree, either a master's or a PhD, with almost half of each of these kind of job roles reporting that they had a graduate degree, with the exception of facilitator and instructor. So really highly educated group, and kind of speaks to L&D as a whole, different kinds of educational experiences that might help you if these are one of your kind of aspirational goals. So we've talked about careers in L&D. The next thing I want to talk to you about is the outlook for L&D careers. So what do we see happening in the future? So there are a number of different factors impacting salary and demand, the rise of different kinds of work. So with the gig economy and greater and greater career mobility for our workforce, we see a need and even more emphasis on training and upskilling to ensure that the workforce is career ready for their next position. Also, with rapidly advancing technologies, L&D's role has become even more critical in terms of ensuring that the workforce has those technical skills. And then, as I was speaking earlier, the shifting nature of the expectations for L&D have placed more emphasis on L&D as a strategic role. So, given all of those factors, it should be unsurprising that the outlook for L&D is good. This chart is provided to us by Tom Whalen, our Director of Corporate Research, who did an analysis of the Bureau of Labor Statistics data from 2004 to 2022. So was able to look at trends year over year to see what's happening within training and development roles. One caveat that I want to give you about this chart is that it is very specific to these two titles, right? So were they titled training manager? This is not going to include a learning curriculum manager or director of human development. This is going to be specifically looking at people who have titles of training manager or training specialist. And what we see is that since 2004, the number of individuals who hold these job roles has dramatically increased, almost doubled, and specifically driven a lot by that training specialist role. But also training manager growth has actually been relatively large as well. Now, if you look at 2004, which looks a little like an outlier, it's not as big of a growth, but looking at 2005 to 2022, you see some pretty strong growth, almost 11,000 additional jobs over that time. So outlook looks pretty good there. There's another way we can look at this. I did a quick LinkedIn job search to get an idea of the kinds of job openings that are available in the US right now. And man, this is huge. Almost 900,000 job openings for training and development. So clearly organizations are looking for your specific capabilities. When we break that down by job opening, we see over 10,000 training coordinator job openings, almost 45,000 training specialist job openings, 94,000 training manager job openings, and then even almost 2,900 learning and development director job openings. I did do a search for CLO. There are a few hundred openings for that as well. So definitely there is demand for your skill set, which is great. I also looked at the Bureau of Labor Statistics to see what's the projected increase over the next 10 years. And for both training managers and training development specialists, we see that there's about 7 to 8% projected increase over the next 10 years. So when you think about an 8% increase on 367,000 training specialists, that's a huge amount of growth that we're projecting over the next 10 years. So your skills and capabilities are certainly going to continue to be in demand. Okay, so let's shift gears. We've talked about L&D careers. We've talked about the outlook. We know that there are great careers out there and that they're going to continue to be important. Let's talk about the context in which L&D careers are enacted and enabled. One of the things we look at is work location and the schedule that you're working within L&D. So what we saw in our sample is that almost everybody is working either in a hybrid or a remote scenario. There are far fewer L&D professionals who are still working fully in person. We also looked at the number of hours worked per week, and it looks like the majority of folks are working less than 50 hours per week. Now, we did look at the number of hours worked in relation to individuals' job titles, and a little bit of bad news. If you aspire to that higher level position, you're probably going to be working more hours. So 80 to 90% of our CLOs and directors were working more than 40 hours a week, whereas 60% of our training managers were working more than 40 hours a week. And when we looked at content developers, less than 25% were working greater than 40 hours a week. So we do see more hours per week as you move up kind of in that hierarchy. We also looked at department. So within our sample, a little more than 2/3 of the sample worked either within an L&D department or an HR department. And the other 28% worked in kind of an operational department, customer service, sales, operations. They were in sort of the function that they were supporting. There are some pros and cons to either of those. I will say that if you work in a functionally specific department, you are more likely to command a higher salary than the folks who worked within L&D and HR. So that is something to think about when you think about the context of what your career goals are. Another context factor that we looked at was company size. So we know that the size of the organization has a dramatic impact on the way that your job role is enacted. Being a training manager in a small, less than 100 employee organization is very different than being a training manager in a 10,000 plus employee organization. So if you work in a small organization, you are far more likely to be a training department of one. And we talk to training departments of one all the time. And this can be a challenging scenario because the weight of all of the training and development falls on your shoulders. You are in charge of facilitating content development, evaluating, serving as that business partner, working with vendors. So there is just a ton of responsibility and you wear a lot of different hats. There's a lot of variety in what you do. When we look at these larger organizations that may have 20 plus L&D professionals working there, there's far more nuance. So this is where you get into that nuanced, I'm the director of leadership development, or I am a L&D capability architect. Here's where you get those more nuanced positions where you can really deep dive and specialize in a specific area. The final thing I'll say, and I don't have a chart on this, is that our research consistently shows that L&D is applicable across industries, right? So regardless of the industry of the organization, L&D is going to be an important function. But industry did matter in terms of salary with healthcare, retail, and pharmaceuticals commanding kind of the higher salaries. Other industries maybe less, like nonprofits. So this is our context. And we've talked about the careers, we've talked about outlook, context. Now let's talk about career paths. And as I mentioned, 50% of our sample aspired to either training director or CLO. So I am going to focus on kind of paths to that L&D executive, share some information about what that path might look like. What we found is that 43% of training directors previous position immediately preceding that training director role was training manager. 45% of CLOs were formerly training directors, and interestingly, 27% of CLOs were formerly training managers. So when we think about the right kind of step into L&D executive roles, training manager appears to be that kind of great stepping stone to get there. So next we wanted to look at, like, how do we get into this training manager role? And what's really interesting is that there isn't one specific path that leads to training manager. The previous titles of training managers are all over the board. And this is because there are so many different ways that you might find yourself in this training manager role. So I'm going to go over 4 of the main pathways. First, maybe you've earned an advanced degree, you've got a master's or a PhD in adult education or training and development, learning principles. You might also have a credential that validates your abilities in a training manager role. If you are one of these folks and you find yourself in a training manager role, or you're aspiring to hit that training manager role, some of the things that you might find challenging is the context within the training department and how the organization operates and works. So that would be an area of focus to kind of gain experience there, as well as just kind of having that real world applied managerial experience. Another pathway that we see is a training role. So maybe you work within the training department already, you're a curriculum architect, you're instructional designer, you might be a facilitator or a learning consultant. These roles definitely lead to training manager. And if you find yourself in this role and you're aspiring to training manager, often what you're the skill set that you should be focusing on would be those managerial skill sets. So being able to delegate and manage processes, as well as strategic alignment, thinking through the strategy behind the programs that you offer and how they tie to organizational or business goals. The last two there are very interesting. These are folks who didn't have any prior experience or knowledge related to training and development. So we see subject matter experts and functional managers getting promoted or lateral shifts into training manager so often. These are people who were very good in the functional area that they sat. Maybe they were excellent salespeople or really, really great at managing a manufacturing process. So they've demonstrated that they understand the most important components to good performance for that functional area. And that's why they get tapped to move into this training manager role. It makes sense that somebody who understands what it takes to be a good salesperson would be able to provide training to the sales force. However, when people come to us with this background, they tend to lament not having the background related to what their training toolkit even is. What are the resources available to you? How do the training processes get enacted? What should you be thinking about when you're putting together your L&D plan? So each one of these pathways has different developmental needs to be really effective as a training manager. Moving along, we have talked about careers, we've talked about outlook, we've talked about pathways. Let's talk about the competencies that are essential for that L&D executive role. And before we move to that, I have my next poll. So I'd like to hear from the group. Do you feel that you have the skills you need to achieve your L&D career goals? Simple yes or no. I know that there's probably a little more nuance than that, but please select from these two first choice items.
All right, let's just give it a few more seconds. I'm going to count down from 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end it. There you go.
Pretty evenly split. So 55% of you feel really good that you have what you need to achieve your career goals. And 45% of you feel like you still have some stuff that you want to develop to hit those goals. And I think that makes a ton of sense. So very, very good. Thank you for sharing. We did ask this question in our sample. And what we found was that the majority of folks did actually feel like they had what they needed. Now, this is not shocking because we did have this really highly tenured sample, folks who had 15, 20 years of experience. The one thing that I will say is career goal mitigated this. So when you were aspiring to those executive levels, you were a little less likely to think that you had the skills that you needed to hit those goals. So what are the skills that you need? Well, here at Training Industry, we have done a ton of research for, 8 or 9 years, looking at the training manager competencies, the competencies that are needed for that leadership role within a training organization. And I'm just going to briefly review this. We have a lot of resources around it if you're interested, but the model organizes around 7 core responsibilities. So in the middle diamond, the most important of these core responsibilities is strategic alignment, ensuring that your training programs do align to those business outcomes and objectives. On either sides of that, evaluating performance, so being able to demonstrate the impact of your L&D programs, as well as developing and delivering those programs, pretty core to leadership. Then up at the top, we see identifying needs. What is it that the workforce needs? What can training kind of address? As well as optimizing processes, ensuring that your training programs or that your training processes are efficient and that they are effective. We have managing technologies. You have to be able to manage learning technologies in this leadership role. And then selecting and managing resources. This gets at not only selecting and managing your training team or your training personnel, but also selecting and managing vendor relationships, because we do know that training departments tend to need to fill capability gaps with vendors. At the bottom, we have our foundational competencies. These are the things that managers need, generally speaking. Whether you're in a training department or a sales department, you're going to need to be able to drive performance through others. You need organizational awareness. These are competencies that are kind of core to being a leader. So we asked as part of our L&D careers and salary survey, and we asked honestly across many different surveys about our respondents' abilities in these areas. And we tend to see something that looks very similar to this. So generally speaking, the folks that complete our surveys feel confident that they're performing either average or above average in each of these 7 areas. When we look at the excellence, so that dark green line, we get a little more nuance. So only about 20 to 30% of folks feel like they're really excelling in these areas, which leaves 70 to 80% who feel like there's room for improvement. So the other thing that we tend to ask is, where do you need more development? And I always find it really interesting that folks rate themselves fairly highly on strategic alignment, and yet no matter what, it tops the development needs. So everyone kind of feels that there's more room for improvement, that there's more development that we can get when it comes to strategic alignment. And that makes a ton of sense, because it's one of the most important things that you do as an L&D leader. So half of our sample felt that they needed more development in this area, and then roughly 40% felt they needed more development in optimizing processes, assessing performance, and managing technologies. So we'll briefly review the competencies related to those responsibilities. Strategic alignment, that top one, being able to influence and negotiate and engage in that strategic thinking are kind of the core key competencies to help you improve in this area. Looking at evaluating performance, so really demonstrating the impact of L&D, you're going to want to focus on organizational performance analysis as well as performance measurement. Next, we have optimizing processes. Here, focusing in on critical thinking and problem solving is really the best competencies to help you think through the logic of your process flows and how they interrelate. Looking at managing learning technologies, even as a training leader, you need to have the ability to think through human factors or the UX of those technologies, as well as understanding how learning technologies can apply in your learning organization. There are 2 foundational competencies that are also really critical to that next executive level, one being change management and the next being business acumen. So those are 2 key areas to also focus in on. All right, so now we're going to round it out. We've talked about careers, we've talked about outlook, went over some of the competencies that are really important to get you to that next executive level. We're going to talk now about strategies as you start to focus in on your career plan or you start to refine that plan. So I want to get a feel for where everyone is in their professional development planning. This is our next poll question. So how confident are you in your professional development plan? Maybe you have a well-defined plan that includes professional development activities and experience that you know that you need to meet your goals. Maybe you've considered development activities and experience, but you haven't set aside a defined plan to accomplish them. You might know what your career goals are, but you haven't identified professional development activities or experiences that are going to help you reach that. And at the bottom here, maybe you haven't identified your career goals yet. You're getting started, you know, you want to achieve something, but you haven't quite figured out what that is. All of these are totally fine. And I'm hoping that in the next couple of slides, I'll be able to provide some pretty good strategies regardless of where you are in this professional development planning process.
All right, everyone, if you haven't put your answers in, go ahead and do so. I'll give you about 3 more seconds because it looks like most of everyone participated. So 1, 2, 3.
Okay, so most people are falling in the middle here, right? So consider professional development activities. Maybe you don't have a defined plan. You've defined your career goals, but you might not know what activities to engage in. And for those of you who haven't identified your career goal or who have that well-defined plan, I think we still have some tips and strategies that are going to help you with those. So let's move to how we work through our plan. So your first step, and this is our such important step, please do not skip it, is researching your options. Those of you who answered that you had well-defined goals and activities and plans, if you didn't do this first step, consider going back and revisiting this because it's so important. So you want to research your options. And here, the first step is to engage in that self-reflection. Really start to think through what those core must-haves are. What are the components of your career that you must have to feel successful, to feel excited about your job? Think about the things that you've done in the past and what you liked about them, and the things that you didn't like about your previous job roles, things that you like and don't like about your current job role. Really give yourself time to sit in that and discover what you consider success. And again, don't just focus on the title you want, but what you want to be doing when you're there and how you want to feel when you're there. Also consider the context that you want to be in. Is it a large organization? Are there certain departments that are more interesting to you? Do you work best alone? Do you like the freedom of being your own kind of training team? You get to make the decisions and set the strategy, or do you work better in a big group of people? All of these are really important things to consider as you self-reflect. The next step is to go through your connections and identify folks who have the job roles, who sit in the context that you're hoping to move into. And you might not know exactly, so keep your net broad as you go through your connections and identify individuals who have these interesting types of careers or career paths. And you can do this by looking at your LinkedIn connections. You can do this by looking around at your L&D professionals. Maybe you see somebody on our training industry website who wrote an article that's very interesting. So there's a lot of different ways to identify folks for this next step, which is your informational interviews. Here, you want to talk to these people. And I will give you a couple of suggestions. When you reach out, make sure that you share with them how much time you're going to take in this informational interview, what your goals are, and really important that you share a set of kind of example questions that you're going to ask them during the interview. So what kinds of things would you ask? Ask them what their typical day is. Ask them what their challenges are. Ask them what types of experiences and skills and competencies help to prepare them for the position that they're in. Make sure you leave room for them to tell you what they don't like about what they're doing so that you can get that piece as well. So engaging in these informational interviews, doing this kind of research gathering is going to really help you to hone in on what your career goals might be. So moving from this research step, the next step is to set your goals. And you want to set long-term career goals. So maybe say, at the end of my career, I want to be an executive in L&D. I want my salary to be this. I want the organization to be this. Maybe it's a little bit more about what you want to be doing. I want to be having a dramatic impact on a large workforce. I want to be developing leaders at all levels of a Fortune 500 organization. So be specific and don't focus entirely on those kind of outwardly focused career success measures. Also ask yourself what would look like success in terms of how you feel about your role. Having developed those long-term goals, it's also very important to look at short-term goals. So pick a time frame. Maybe it's a year, maybe it's 3 years down the line. What will success look like for you then? Perhaps you're not going to hit that long-term career goal in the next year or 3 years, but you could start moving towards that. So maybe success in the next year is developing yourself as a thought leader around an area of expertise that you're hoping to align with, or it could be getting involved in a project or a function at work that you haven't really been able to engage in. So develop those short-term goals as well. Once you have those goals, the next step is to create your plan. And here, very, very important that you assess your own skill set and experiences to identify gaps between where you are now and where you'll need to be to hit those goals. We're going to follow up with some resources available to you to help you through all of these various steps, one of which is going to be an assessment that you can use to assess yourself against that training manager competency model. There are also many, many other tools out there that you can use. And certainly those informational interviews are going to give you an idea of what you might need to hit those goals. Identify actions to help you build those skills and gain experience. I'll talk to you a little bit about professional development in a minute to help you kind of hit those, but really kind of be specific about what you need to do to get there. And then track your achievements. Don't just move along your plan, but make sure you're revisiting it, reassess it regularly, and document what you've done and where you've been. Okay. As you create this plan, it's really important that you also identify your champions and you build your brand. Got this great quote here from Julie Kirsch. She wrote an article for our website, and she said that you need to build a board of directors for your career, specifically containing 4 roles. So your mentor is going to be somebody who knows your heart and soul, and they're going to help you make your life decisions. Your sponsor is someone at work who will put you up for special assignments and who will stand up for you and vouch for your abilities. A coach is somebody who gives you constructive feedback and helps you work to bridge the gaps within what you're doing now and where you want to be. And then a role model is someone who's been where you were, they've been in your shoes previously, and now they're somewhere that you aspire to be. So you can look to them as aspirational. Really important that you develop this support system as you work through your career path. You also want to think about your brand. So this is what you are associated with, what people think about when they think about you. So what do you want to be known for? What are you passionate about? Think through that and then become an expert. So subscribe to industry trends, industry information, take courses, certifications, do things to help yourself become an expert. And then share out. So connect with folks in that area, publish, present, post, share resources, do things that start to associate you with that area. As you move through your career path, you will encounter career transitions. So I have 5 tips for you here as you move through those transitions. 1, regardless of if you're ready to transition or not, you need to keep your resume current, right? Because when it comes time to updating your resume 5 years down the line, you may not remember all of your great accomplishments. So keep your resume current. You also don't know when your next opportunity is going to come. So it's really great to go ahead and have that resume ready to go just in case. As you're looking at career transitions, consider job crafting. So make sure that you share with your manager and your peers and other folks within your organization and your external network what it is that you are looking to accomplish. It may be that you can add or shift responsibilities in your current job role to get you closer to what you're looking for in your career. 3rd one is ask your network for help. So this is where you want to share out to your network what you're hoping to achieve and really let them know so they can be looking out for you as well. We know that 82% of employers rate employee referrals above all sources for candidates. So where possible, ask your network for that referral if you have a job that you're looking to transition into. Practice explaining your connections. So this is a really great one to work with your board, those folks from the previous slide. Work with your board on these connections. Also do it on your own, write it down, talk to your friends or your spouse or your partner about this. This is the connections between your previous job roles, the role you're in now, and where you want to be. What are those core components that have prepared you or are preparing you for that next step? And what are your key factors that make you unique and that you're looking for in your next role? The better you get at telling that story, the better you are going to be at securing those kinds of things in your career. And then finally, when you're looking at a career transition, it's important to start shifting your brand. So if you are currently a training manager in a small organization, you wear all the hats, but you're really trying to move into an organization where you're more specialized on one specific area, maybe it's sales training, then you're going to want to start posting, start reading, start talking about sales training and what's effective there. So really important to shift that expertise area before you get into the role. All right, we're going to round it out now and talk about some professional development activities that you should consider for your plan and your career path to help you move from where you are now to that next stage. One thing I'll say is that we know that 86% of our sample had a professional development budget that was either staying the same or increasing. It's likely that you have a professional development budget with your organization. Use it. This is a great resource. And what we see is that when you do have a budget, you're 3 times more likely to say that you're able to hit your career goals with the skill set that you have. So definitely use it wisely, and I'll talk to you about how to do that. So I've listed out 3 main professional development activities that you could engage in. We've got training, so advanced education, credentials, maybe you want to earn a certification or some kind of licensure to validate your abilities in an area, as well as courses and workshops. These are great ways to hone in on skill sets that you may not have. Experience, so special assignments in your current job role. Maybe there's a new job role that you want to apply for or take on. And if you aren't getting what you need at work, if you don't have the ability to gather this experience in your own organizational context, really consider volunteering. Get involved with an association related to what you're doing, or even unrelated. Volunteering can be an excellent way to build that experience that you're not able to get. So if you want to move into a training manager role and you haven't ever managed before, look around and see if you can get some of that managerial experience in a volunteer position. And then finally, networking. It's so key that you're building your network. These are the folks who are going to put you up for new jobs. They're going to make recommendations. You're also going to be able to hear more about what other L&D career paths look like and expand your horizons. So attend conferences and don't be shy. Talk to people when you're there. Make those connections. Follow up and friend them on LinkedIn. Email them. Make sure you're nurturing those connections. Join associations, particularly local ones are nice because you get to get that face-to-face interaction with folks and share your expertise. Share it face-to-face, share it virtually through webinars, share it on LinkedIn. These are all ways to build your network. I have one final chart for you. And this is again derived from that career and salary survey that we've been doing. The blue bar shows us the professional development activities that our sample participated in within the past 12 months. And the green bar tells us what they found most beneficial. So we see that almost 70% are taking these online trainings, LinkedIn Learning, Udemy, Coursera. Another 64% are attending webinars and podcasts like this webinar right here. The green bar is actually very interesting because what we see is the most beneficial kind of professional development activity is a stretch assignment. So this is when I was talking about earlier, those special assignments that you want to ask your manager to put you up for, or ask your peers. These stretch assignments are going to really help you to practice your skill set and develop your skill set and also assess where you are. So where possible, put your name in the hat, raise your hand, and sign up for these kinds of assignments. Next on the list, we have professional certifications. This is a great way to validate your abilities. It also helps you to hone in on the competencies that you need to hit those professions. Typically, certifications are going to be around a specific job role. And so if your goal is, for example, training manager, you want to find a certification that will help you get there. If your goal is HR manager, a certification to help you get there. Those certifications are based on a body of knowledge that will again help to target where you focus your energy. And then 3 other ones to highlight that are a little bit, well, advanced degree is probably the most time intense, but in-person conferences and then workshop certificates and instructor-led courses, also about 30% agreeing that those were the most beneficial of the things that they had participated in the year. So those are also great ways to really focus in on skills gaps that you may have. All right, so we don't have a ton of time for questions, but I do want to open it up for questions. I also have a link here, and we'll follow up with this information, but if you go to that link, you'll be able to see and get a bunch of different resources to help you with your career planning.
All right, well, if you guys have any questions, please pop it in the chat or the Q&A section actually, and we'll get going. I'll start with this one. Where is the best place to get training / certification for L&D roles if you're new to L&D? And I have a feeling I know what you're probably already going to say.
I might be a little bit biased, but I do think that training industry offers some great courses and certifications. No, it really depends on what your career goals are. If you are aspiring to that executive leader position, training industry is going to be your spot because we've focused really explicitly on helping folks get to that leadership position and what those competencies are. If you aspire or are trying to develop yourself in an area other than training leadership, there are a number of different places you can look. I would say ATD is one of the best for many of the various training roles within a training department.
Great. Awesome. And then there's a question that's going back to the slide where you had education 55%. I think they just want to know, what do you mean by that?
Yes, apologies. 55% of the sample had a graduate degree, either a master's or a sample, or either a master's or a PhD.
Cool. All right, we have time just for a few more questions regarding common job roles. This is regarding something on slide 10. Is the years of experience, oh, I think we probably already answered something kind of close to that. Sorry, here we go. Does the number of...
I'll go ahead and say the years of experience was just descriptive of our sample. So definitely doesn't mean that you need that many years of experience to hit that job role. I think when we look out to job postings, we tend to see for training managers, you want 5 or more years of experience, relevant years of experience. And then at those higher levels, you're going to be looking at more like 10.
All right, let's go to this one. I think she's referring to something on slide 18. Does the number of employees equate to the number of learners in your audience? Asking for those of us whose audience is not company employees, but outside association members.
That's a great question. And I see it, Melissa. I'd like to say yes, but also it depends. So certainly when you have a large number of, let me rethink with this question. So you're saying if we looked at slide 18, in our study, did we ask the number of learners rather than the number of employees? And we didn't. So that one slide should really be interpreted as the number of employees with the organization. I will say that the number of learners that you serve is related to the number of L&D employees within your organization. So even if you're a small organization, like training industry, you may have a number of different L&D employees because you serve out customers. And there are a large number of those who are going through your learning and development programs.
Good. All right, so this is a pretty long one, but I think a lot of people might be able to relate to this question. She says it's super helpful in affirming that not only do I have the right degrees, credentials, and experience, but that I'm also approaching my next steps in the best possible way on research, goal setting, plan, and execute. I'm in the execute phase and I'm having a hard time getting to an interview, which tells me I'm not doing a good job of conveying this in my resume. What recommendations do you have on that front?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, gosh, this is so tough, right? You're applying to the jobs and you're not getting the interview. So my recommendation would be to reach out to your network and find folks who are in positions like what you're looking for and ask them to review your resume, gather feedback on kind of how you're positioning your skill set, how you're talking about your previous experiences. It could be that there's some great kind of low-hanging fruit to improving your resume that you just haven't seen because you don't have that external perspective. And it also could be that your network will tell you, well, there are some other experiences that would help you get this interview or help you to move to that next step in the hiring process. So definitely lean on those folks for that resume review. I also always encourage a cover letter. So make sure your cover letter is telling that story. We talked about practicing your connections. You want to make sure that it's brief and succinct, but that you do emphasize those connections and how they have prepared you for that next step.
Awesome. All right, so just last question before we wrap up. I'm not sure if networks would be the answer to this as well, but which platforms would be helpful to find remote L&D job opportunities?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, obviously your network is a great source, but LinkedIn is a great source of job roles as well as Indeed. So both of those really current with job roles. You want to type in remote in the location so that you can find jobs that are really specifically targeting that remote area. But the other thing that I'll say is, even if it doesn't say remote, it might be a possibility. So you just want to express that desire when you're in that hiring process.
Awesome. Well, great. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Duvernay, for such an amazing session. I know everyone was just taken away with all the great information that applies right to them in their role. And I would like to give a shout out to all of you. Thank you so much for tuning into our training industry webinar today. Just to close this up and wrap us up today, I'd like to invite you all to join us at our upcoming training industry webinars, as you can see on the screen. You can register for this webinar and watch past webinars now at www.trainingindustry.com. Also, as a reminder, all training industry webinars are pre-qualified for a credit hour by SHRM, HRCI, ISPI, and CPTM. And what is CPTM? It is a certified professional in training management program that assists you in developing core competencies that can empower you to manage the future training needs of your organization. Get a seat at the executive table. You can participate in a number of programs held within the US. Find more information at our website at trainingindustry.com/training. And we would love to see you in person at our next training industry conference and expo happening next month in June in Raleigh, North Carolina. We hope to see you guys there. One last reminder that an evaluation survey should have popped open or will pop open in another tab in your browser. And we greatly would welcome your feedback about today's content, the speaker, and whatever else you'd love to see us do. Thanks again to today's speaker, Dr. Amy Duvernay, and thanks to all of you guys for your time and attention. From Training Industry, I'm Danielle Murdaugh. Until next time, take care, everyone. Bye.